Well, good evening and a very warm welcome on behalf of Milim to this evening's presentation. Welcome to you wherever you are in the UK and wherever you are in the world. And once again, I'm delighted to welcome our viewers from across the globe. This evening, our series of online talks and conversations continues with our guest, Emil Draitser, and I'll introduce Emil in just a moment after some brief housekeeping. Please do ask questions. We would encourage you to do so, and this is possible by typing whatever you'd like to ask into the Q&A facility on your screen. As ever, we will try our best to get through as many of your questions as we can. Let me also draw your attention to the chat facility. You can use this to send a message to all of the other participants on this webinar, should you wish to do so. And we will be recording this event, and it'll appear on our website at milim.org.uk in the next 2 or 3 days. There you will find recordings of other past events, as well as details of our program, future program, for which you can book tickets. Now, to our guest. Emil Draitser was born in Odessa, Ukraine, into a working-class Jewish family. He studied at the Odessa Polytechnic Institute and at the Moscow School of Journalism. Under the pen name Emil Abramov, he began his writing career as a freelancer, producing satirical articles for leading Soviet publications. Having been blacklisted for writing an article critical of an important official, he emigrated to the United States, and in 1975, he settled in Los Angeles, where he gained a PhD in Russian literature from UCLA. Since 1986, he has taught Russian at Hunter College in New York City, where he is now Professor Emeritus. His first book, Forbidden Laughter, published in 1980, brought him to national attention, with extensive coverage in leading press titles, as well as many television appearances. He has since written several books about his experiences, as well as some works of fiction. Emil was last with us back in 2021 to discuss his book, The Jaws of the Crocodile, one of 3 books making up an autobiographical trilogy. He's recently published another work, his 18th book since relocating to America, and this is Laughing All the Way to Freedom, the Americanization of a Russian Emigre, part memoir and part cultural study about the challenges of immigration and American acculturation. And I'm delighted to welcome Emil back to Milim, and without further ado, we'll hand over to him. He joins us tonight live from New Jersey. Welcome, Emil.
Thank you. Kind of the need to write this particular book came more or less natural, because I doesn't matter that it's already almost 50 years as I'm in America. I still, almost every day, I feel there are still remnants of my previous cultural kind of makeup that influences my view of America. And I just thought of it that actually it would be interesting to examine it. What were expectations and what was the reality coming from a totally different world, if you wish. I came from still Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War, in a country that was totally different on many levels, not only politically, but economically, culturally, and so on. So therefore, now to look back at really what was my life in America at that time in terms of getting acquainted with the totally new culture, is I found it that I have done it without noticing it by way of writing short satirical pieces of anything that struck me in America unusual. Oh, satirical pieces for a simple reason. I have a satirical mind because I came from the Soviet Union already, as John already introduced me. used to be a satirical writer. Now, obviously, people say, come on, what are you talking about? Isn't it Soviet satire like contradiction in terms? Well, actually, no. If you understand that there are so many sides of Soviet life that needed satire. The only limitation from me as published satirical writer at that time was not to make any generalization. So in other words, you can say that the shoes of factory number 17 in the city of Kuybyshev is not good, but you cannot say that the whole system is not producing anything good because of the economic system of the Soviet Union. I could not, by all means, use any generalization. Otherwise, it would be not published at all. So therefore, satire was always localized. But nevertheless, this kind of this sense of the look at the life from satirical point of view, I brought it with me. I couldn't make it my mind already after 10 years of writing this satirical pieces. I felt, well, let's look at America. And so therefore, I look now, the whole book is basically a number of essays written by around the publications, my satirical publication in America, in American periodicals and also in Russian Emigre periodicals and translated into English as well. So looking back, I kind of realized, looking all of them, how I gradually try to probe, understand America from that point of view. So maybe first of all, I wanted to show the cover of my book, and let me see if I can share screen here. Yes. Yeah, so this is the cover of the book. I just want to explain the picture on top of it is the picture of my family, now totally reunited. I think it's first I came to this country with my wife and my son. They're in the middle of it. That's my son, age at that time, age 2 year old in the picture. And my mother, my father, my uncle, and my brother, all my family. Now, something that probably some Americans or people in the West do not probably forgot, that actually the immigration from the Soviet Union was allowed under certain circumstances in exchange for grain from America and from Canada, because the Soviet system could not produce enough food for the population. So that kind of an exchange of it. I don't want to go in details of it. Of course, there in my books, I do write about exactly why and how this was done. But basically, that was the reason why we were allowed to leave. So basically, in my introduction to this book, I compare our immigration with the ancient exodus from Egypt, and I was struck by similarity, including even the numbers in the Old Testament. It's in the Exodus book. It's like 600,000 of families, means without counting of women and children, which allows about 1.5 million of our immigration. And on. Probably the most important thing which related to the subject of the book is that, as we know at the end of the book of Exodus, that Moses got a word from God that you really, those who ran from Egypt after the age of 20 have to spend 40 years in desert before to end the promised land, which I kind of interpret now as basically by the age of 20, you're already imbued with all the customs of slavery, of the mentality of a slave, and it's really very difficult to be a free man. Anyway, but my book is kind of an attempt to go back and look at what really that experience was all about. So that was the I'm just for modern Exodus, was between 1968 until its collapse of the Soviet Union, 1991. Well, of course, there were some immigration continued, but under different circumstances. So just briefly, the covers of my books that are preceding it. Shush, a memoir, Growing Up Jewish Under Stalin, was published in America by University of California Press. Then the second book was the book of that we discuss here at the Millennium 2021 is In the Jaws of the Crocodile, basically covering all my writing and life in the Soviet Union as such, and immigration, Farewell Mama Odessa, that's my hometown Odessa, and how it was all for all of us coming to different country. Now, just briefly, I just show you, for you, that's my kind of credentials as a satirical writer. I was a correspondent of the magazine Crocodile that was published in unbelievable more than 10 million copies every month. So satire was needed. Now, so discovering America, what I really felt, obviously you would understand, American supermarket for us was numero uno wonder. How come? Why? Obviously, anybody remembers Soviet Union, that was the shelves, that were the view of the shelves at that time. So that was difficult to fathom, to the degree even that to say that why so much of variety? Isn't it enough of this project? This product exists at all, at least in one kind. Why have to make every time a choice? Why so much choice? But then I remember that actually about the same time as my immigration, in 1976, a Soviet pilot, Viktor Belyanko, defected to the West. And what really happened, he defected, not just himself, but he brought the latest Soviet military jet to Japan. And obviously, he was a persona non grata, and he was brought to, from what I heard the story, he was brought to Washington, D.C. for debriefing, of course, to CIA, to Pentagon. And so the men who handled him, every day would bring him back for debriefing and then back to his hotel. So one day, the man who was responsible for Belyanka's kind of a movement asked him on the way to his hotel, he wouldn't mind that he has to stop and buy some instant coffee his wife told him to buy. And would he mind to come together with him? So Belyanka went together with this American to the supermarket. And that's obviously how the supermarket looked like. Now, when they came back, the American noticed that the face of Belyanka was less than happy. He was angry. He was angry, and he couldn't understand. I mean, the American couldn't understand why such a reaction to it. And basically is that Belyanka could not understand that this is reality. He tried to say something like, look, I risk my life by bringing this plane. Isn't that enough for you to understand that I am sincere in what I'm saying? Why should you do this kind of a Hollywood exposure? I mean, otherwise, he could not believe that it's just a regular American supermarket to that extent. So much was the kind of the difference between Soviet reality in America. Obviously, we also kind of, I wrote about it in one of my columns in America. Now, what else also, so my book basically is, it has 3 parts: discovering America. Second part is discovering self in America, and the road to Americanization. That's the 3 parts. So in discovering America, I also felt that there are so many dramatic differences between Soviet Union and America. For example, work ethics. I remember it was the first time I encountered it when my American, who we became friends of, told me that he doesn't understand. He tried to help another couple of immigrants from Soviet Union, and he gave them a job at his company. He had a small company, and he gave them a job there. But he told me that he doesn't understand why these people are kind of take long kind of stop for smoking, where they, in other words, that they are not cherishing the very fact that they have a job. And needless to say that in the Soviet Union, that was everybody, there was no unemployment, but that necessarily means that people work, that the attitude was to do as little as you can. There's what Russian say, где бы не работать, лишь бы не работать. No matter where you work, as long as you don't. That kind of a thing. So obviously this is, at the same time, something else that was on the first stop, I could not believe. I wanted to share and show you something else. This is, okay, maybe I'll just talk about it. In the Soviet Union, everywhere you would see posters that work, labor is a matter of glory, a matter of outstanding kind of advantages that we all have, and so on and so forth. And so working people, this is, it's a matter of honor, it's a matter of prestige, and so on and so forth. And in America, all of a sudden, one of the places to eat called TGA, thank God it's Friday. In other words, it was totally, as a total shock for us. How come American admitted they're working because they have to work? That's about it. It's not necessarily a matter of any glory and so on. But overall, I have to say, on the first steps, we immigrants from the Soviet Union found Americans not the way they were presented in Soviet propaganda, who they were kind of a person to person. It's like a wolf dog eat dog world, and so on. We found them mostly cheerful Americans, friendly, trying to compliment on every step. For example, they would say, well, obviously we came with very little English, and I'll just explain to you to what degree, give you example of it. On my first kind of year in America, when I tried to get a loan, I needed to call a local bank asking for the officer who is dealing with it. And I say, can I talk to Mr. Smith? And the secretary says, I'm sorry, but Mr. Smith has passed away. So I replied to him, when he's coming back. So where English was very formal, to understand idioms, to say, well, I knew the word pass, but not that what it passed away means, and so on. So nevertheless, American would say, oh, your English is better than my Russian. Obviously, it's a gesture of friendliness, because why they need Russian at all? But we obviously, in being in coming to America, obviously needed English first and foremost. But there were some other things that were sort of totally culturally kind of shocking. For example, one day I listened on the radio a song called "Wonderful World." You probably still remember it. I don't know, it's a one line. I don't know much, a young man sings. I don't know much geography, algebra, trigonometry, but I know that I love you. So obviously for us coming from the Soviet Union, I thought myself, wait a minute, is this American pickup line, being ignorant? What's so attractive in being ignorant? And we found that by and large, Americans have a problem with geography. They say, well, judging by your accent, you're probably somewhere either in Hungary. In other words, they would not, till today, if I ask my students which countries comprise Eastern Europe, they will have a problem with that as well. Yeah, so, but little by little, kind of I got to know better America and understand that actually attitude toward education is inverted pyramid. In other words, in the beginning, it's not so much requirement is imposed on youth. Once you get as much education as you want to, if you want to achieve in something in life, you have to. I found it going through American system of education myself, getting my doctorate, that actually the more the higher is the level of kind of acquiring knowledge, the more difficult it is, and so on. But also there are other things quite strange. For example, attitude towards cars. I found that by and large, for Americans, cars are more than just a machine. It's almost like a living being. I know that my daughter, who immigrated later on, she was given, American family brought a used car and gave her, in order to help her on the first stages. And obviously she was very appreciative. But then the whole family came and they took picture, like selfie together with the car, almost like a car is like a relative for them. And so I have also included in my book a short kind of a humorous vignette about the man so much in love with his own car that he followed him even to the new owner, wants to know how the car is doing and things like that. So that's obviously those of you who would be interested would read it in the book. Also, something that I found unusual. All of a sudden, I took part in some conference, a conference on humor studies, since I knew something about humor and satire coming from work in the genre. One day, I received email from one of the men who attended the conference, telling that if I donate to him, send him a pair of my used shoes, then he would do donation to the charity of my choice. I couldn't understand what I was not celebrity at all, but it looks like in America, they look for celebrity. They made me celebrity. In other words, the eye of the man who sent it to me, I was a local celebrity. I mean, that's totally different world that I could not understand. Now, but at the same time, some important human issues like friendship, for example. I found that there is a profound difference between friendship in the Soviet Union, in the way I knew it, and the friendship in America. Because American culture is built on sustainment, of independence. And in Russia, oftentimes friends are even closer than some family members, because your life often depends on the help of your friends. So this is kind of totally going into details, of course, in the book. Totally difficult for us newcomers to understand that actually there's a difference. Needless to say, when it comes to looking for love, it happened that in the middle of my life, I turned out to be divorced, and I knew nothing about how to go about find a mate in the totally new culture. So I had an American friend who agreed to be my love guru. So in what sense? He actually tried to explain to me that, first of all, to be sure that I look to the personal ads and beware of catfishing. I didn't know what catfishing means. I thought it means cat fishing, trying to catch a fish, or whatever it means. Well, he explained to be careful because people misrepresent themselves and so on. But the most important, just see what a woman who wants to meet a man of your age. I was around 50 at that time, and so I read them. New York Magazine, the New York Review of Books, things like that. And my American friend, my love guru, said to me, I said, well, listen, look like they all want me. They say you have to be cultured, successful. Well, by that time I already published, I remember, 3 or 4 of my books and so on. Yes, and he told me, no, you're not successful. In America, success means you make a lot of money. That would mean success. So obviously that was a kind of a different acquaintance with the American system of values and so on. There were other things that were to me totally new. One day, for example, attitude toward literature. In America, not only in America, in the Western world, most of literature is primarily for entertainment. But in Russia, no. Russia, I would not call myself even a writer, because precisely is something, it's like a priest. There's something above, and so yeah. Historically, I don't have time to go into details to explain why, but attitude toward a writer is totally different. He's highly respected. And I found in America, the approach is from pure entertainment. And therefore, I published Studies in Contemporary Satire, American Journal, published one of my satirical pieces when Leo Tolstoy comes to American publishing house with War and Peace, and how he's treated that way. I don't want the same is it's there. But what I really found interesting and unexpected, and here I probably wanted to show you why, because it would be, is that on the first steps, we newcomers from the Soviet Union, in immigrant community, a small publishing house in Los Angeles, Almanac, we decided to publish a collection of Soviet underground jokes. How come Americans don't know? We live by them. They were the only source that supported us, our spirit in this abdominal way of life that we have. And so obviously, because, well, I have connection, of course, with satirical genre, they asked me to put together this collection. And now I wanted to share with you and to show this, what happened to this book. Okay. Okay, the book is, here I'm going down. Yeah, the book is Forbidden Laughter, that was published in 1980. in 2 languages, Forbidden Laughter, Soviet Underground Jokes. So when it actually was a small publishing house, we had no idea of what it mean promotion, what it mean advertisement, nothing like that. But just by word of mouth, all of a sudden, it became a hit. We could not understand why. For example, I was interviewed by New York Times and then Washington Post and Atlantic Monthly Published Review and the Chicago Sun-Times. I was invited to Merv Griffin talk show, that time very, very popular. So we could not understand why, what happened. And the simple truth was that in America, by that time, there was established kind of public image of Russians of being humorless. For example, in the movie From Russia with Love, this is the parts of the character, of Russian character, Rosa Klep, okay? Now, also a famous movie, Ninochka. She was so practically the whole movie, she's not smiling even. Greta Garbo plays her, but not a smile almost to the end of the movie until she falls in love and so on. Now, there was also in America a series of Rocky and Bullfingal show for 5 years. So they show a Russian Boris Badenov, which means bad enough, of course, and Natasha Fatal, that also the 2 Russian spies. Then there was a Dracula. Also, Dracula was considered to be a Russian Dracula's daughter, is a Russian girl. Now the character was Slavic name Igor in Mel Brooks movies. That's the way they are, ugly, not smiling, and so on. So eventually we understood that basically the most famous, the one joke in the book, which Americans would understand the same way as we Russians, was question to Radio Armenia. Of course, Radio Armenia was a fictitious radio. Most of the these jokes were produced in Odessa among Jews. So the question will be that what bothered everybody back in 1980. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. So it was not a time of by all means of peace. So will there be a 3rd World War? And the answer, no. There will not be a 3rd World War. However, but there will be such a fight for peace that not a single stone will be left unturned. So that's how the humor helped to overcome that kind of the anxiety of that side. By the way, in 1980, Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and that added to the tension that existed between 2 countries. So there were many other things that in America, for example, attitude toward America, attitude in America to handicapped people. And that I wanted to also show you what I found amazing, that this is, let me show you this, this part of it. Okay, just 1 second. Yeah, so that's something that was never existed in the Soviet Union. Look at it. We saw in America kneeling buses, parking spot for handicapped people, translator for people who cannot hear. It's amazing. And what was on our memory is this was the following pictures where this is after the end of World War II, and I remember as a child, 2.5 million disabled were discharged from the army, right? And this is how they look like. And what really happened to them? Basically, very short time. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not. Anyway, to make it short, these handicapped people were one day disappeared from the city streets. They were simply taken away by police and to remote areas of not to upset foreign tourists who come to the Soviet Union with all of this. They disappeared totally. Nobody knows about it. No, nothing like American million buses or spots, parking spots for handicap, whatever existed, and so on. So that was really something that really was totally different. There were other things that we kind of, how to say it, for example, one day I was the graduate student at UCLA, was a phone call from outside to the office, and the secretary said, well, Emil, it looks like you may answer the question. So I picked up the phone, and a woman asked me, please, would you tell us a Russian name for a tiger? I say, what do you mean, Russian name? No, well, how you call a tiger? I say, well, usually I don't socialize with tigers, but if it's a cat, then we'll call it kisa. Kisa. Oh, she said, great. I say, well, why you need it? Why you need this kind of name for a tiger? Oh, we are protesting. We're trying to save Siberian tigers at that time, a campaign. So, and then the rest of the piece that I wrote was kind of indignation. Well, in America, everything is about protesting, doesn't matter what, and so on and so forth. And so many years later, actually, this piece was published by one of the American magazines. And then so many years later, I looked at and I found this, my publication. I thought of it, oh my God, am I against protesting? If not for protesting in America, I would not be able to come to the country, because so many people remember there was a campaign, a Soviet Jewry campaign in America that actually was a lot of pressure on the officials to condition the immigration of, especially of Jews from the Soviet Union by connecting connecting it with the sale of grain. In other words, let the people go who wants to go, and so on. So that's kind of a later day realization how Soviet my mind still was. How come people would protest and so on. So this all, I mean, many other things said, but there were also other side of it that actually of self-discovery. For example, I looked at the Russian Emigre paper in America, and it was something like business marriage. And I couldn't understand what it meant. I called the editor. I said, "What do you mean by business marriage?" Well, if somebody wants to come to America, become citizen, he'll marry this woman who already in America who is citizen. And I said, wait a minute, isn't it punishable law? You get what, 5 or 8 years of prison for defrauding United States government. Oh, we don't know. We just say we are not responsible with anyone else. In other words, it was in Russia, for its long history, there was no really such a thing as law to be observed to the point. It was usually there's Russian proverb, "Закон что дышло, куда повернешь, туда и вышло." In other words, the law is like as a bar between horses. You can change it and so on. In other words, there was no actually respect for the law as such. And that respect, I remember still that during this time of Gorbachev, that President Reagan met Gorbachev, and Reagan told Gorbachev, become a law-abiding country. We will support you, because that's important. So something, I mean, so many things that they were difficult to fathom. Of course, there are so many other things. So many other things that I cover in the book, But at the end of it, since it's about time for me to wrap up, but the end of it, I came to realize relatively recently, maybe a year or 2 years ago, that actually I still don't know so much about American culture, American institution. For example, a friend of mine, I talked to him on the phone. He lived on the other side of the country in California. All of a sudden, during our conversation, I see his voice lowered and then stopped altogether. I realized that something really happened there with him, because he's already an elderly man. So I called our mutual friend. Actually, we met, both of them. We became classmates at UCLA. And I told her, listen, something has really happened. And she asked, the first thing she asked me, let's double check his address. I said, why do you need the address? Well, I wanted to call to police. I say, call to police? What are you talking about? Because from my background, coming from the Soviet Union, police is not something you can call for any help. And she says, no, there's such a thing as a wellness check. So she called police, and police came to the building that he lived, asked manager to open the door, and they found him on the floor, he fainted and so on. So that I realized that no matter what is very, very difficult to acquire. Actually, I actually found one American proverb that actually describes it very well. It's you can take the country boy out of the country, but you cannot take the country out of the country boy. That seems to be very true. Thank you for attention. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Emil. That was really fascinating. And of course, there's a lot more in the book besides those few episodes you described.
Yes.
If you have a question for Emil, please do type it into the Q&A now or in the next few minutes. You described the reaction of the pilot when he visited a supermarket. What surprised you the most when you first came to America? What was the sort of thing you really didn't expect that you discovered?
Well, but that's what it is. If you ask about this episode of supermarket, because it was surprised, not, as I already said, that not only that there was so plenty of everything, but there was a tremendous amount of choice you had to make, and that was difficult. How come? If you were glad to get any kind of a let's say instant coffee, right? At that time, but here you have to make a choice between 3, 4, 5 different types and so on. So in other words, the choice became kind of a burden for us, because obviously we went mostly we were poor at first stages, or the price was one of the way to do it, but that's what it is. So it was kind of an unusual difficulty, in other words, difficulty of abundance.
It's interesting that choice becomes a problem. Was there anything that really surprised you?
Well, many things surprised me, as I said, that what really was surprising, as I said, the attitude towards work, that was obviously everybody worked hard, but thank God it's Friday. That was kind of mind-boggling. How come they're not at least showing that they are proud to work and so on? As I said again, the American friendliness that was surprising, cheerfulness. They were kind of open to help you. It was, again, the relationship never, on the first stages at least, never went down. I mean, very close in the beginning, but many other things. I have a chapter where I describe actually surprised that horror as a movie genre of horror movies. It was amazing because probably knowing Soviet history, it was no need for that kind of a horror produced kind of by artists. It was enough in the Soviet history as such. But some other things like the amount of pets, the treatment of pets, so much more. Obviously, in the Soviet Union, there were obviously people who loved animals, but we were not able to have so much of them, not able to take care of them at the same level. What else? Of course, the country, basically the shopping mall, for example, shopping mall was really a revelation. The amount of people in the shopping malls in America was comparably to amount of people who go for a walk in the Central Park in Moscow. I mean, why? What is the entertainment? So for American, entertainment means going to for shopping, shopping there, shopping there. This is totally obviously addressed in the book. Yeah, so that was really the Americans are so many kind of sides of American life that were totally. For example, separately I write about politeness, public politeness. Yeah. And then saw a cartoon in one of the American papers that somebody carries like a sandwich, we call it sandwich man, means his advertisement on him. And the first line says, insult, 25 cents. And I wrote the whole piece about this. What do you mean, 25 cents? Who? You pay to somebody to insult them and use this language? In Russia, we have plenty of that free of charge. you swear on every day. And I cite, of course, actually, it's not a recent development, even in Dostoevsky, one of Dostoevsky's work, I mean, in a diary of a writer, he writes about it, that Russian street language is kind of free-flowing everywhere, and one word replaces so many, and so on. So there are many, I would say it, as I say, attitude toward many things are kind of different. And to begin with friendship, I touched about it. Friendship, friendliness is in Russia. It's a friend is oftentimes is more important than a family member, because you survive because you have friends. Actually, one of the movies that I teach cinema class in my college, has a late Soviet period, and when this kind of cynical young kind of character says, the communism is when everyone has their, if you know a butcher, okay, but it means, butcher, that means he can provide you with short, with some meat, which is a short supply, things like that. So oftentimes this friendship was built on necessity. Somebody who's working, somebody who will give you something that you could not get otherwise, and so on. In America, it's the cult, as I said, cult of self-sustainment. You have to be independent, first and foremost.
But you also describe some of the offers of friendship as being disingenuous and people really motivated by their interest rather than yours.
Yeah, but at the same time, when America is known, for example, I ran, unfortunately, in my own practice, that it's not a good policy to mix business with friendship. In other words, do not, especially finances, they keep it separately and so on. In Russia, it's just the opposite. In the Soviet Union, the opposite. Oftentimes you run out of means to get to the next payment. You go to your friends and they loan you money for you to sustain. Then in turn, you give them money. In other words, you kind of, it's a way of survival. In other words, friendship is a way of survival. It's not a luxury.
We have a couple of questions from our audience. We have Gregory Friston. He says, was it hard to learn to smile when it would be expected without you feeling as you were grinning like an idiot?
Yes, that's actually the difference. It took me a while to handle smiling because in Russian context, the smile is usually reserved for close people, for family. In the streets, people do not you can be taken as like a soft as an idiot if you smile and with no reason. Even that recently, that didn't disappear in Soviet time. It's recently one of my colleagues, American colleagues, who came back from St. Petersburg, said she was walking the streets and smiling, of course, sunny day, things like that. And so some old woman came up to say, "Ты мне скажи, чего ты улыбаешься? Чего ты смеешься, дурочка?" Okay, means what? Tell me why you stupid one smiling, things like that. You know, so it's a different attitude towards smile is totally different. In that way, Russians are much more kind of confined within the family, within the friends and family. Yes, there's a lot of warmth and smiling and so on, but not in public. In America, as a matter of politeness, people smile, right? Just means you're okay, I'm okay, we're both okay, things like that. That's what smile means. But coming from different culture, obviously, it's a big difference. Yeah.
And Yolanta Konika says, how might your experience with Americanization apply to immigrants from other cultures?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that depends on this particular culture. For example, I remember actually I think I wrote like a short essay about about American humor. At that time when I came to America, there were popular jokes about Poles, how stupid they are, and so on and so forth. And I could not understand it coming from the Soviet Union, because in Soviet Union, Poles were considered to be Western country. They were much more, how to say, exposed to the West. They were more more Western than Russians at all. So why they would, obviously I know later on I learned the reason for that jokes, because they basically based on stereotype that existed in the beginning of 20th century, where mostly Polish immigrants coming from, you know, uneducated, working mostly as on building, on structures, construction, and so on. So that came from that kind of a stereotype, but that would not totally. In other words, depends on the culture you come from. You obviously run into. America has its own DNA. As I said, one of the probably most important thing that I discovered, that this kind of a America that is built by people who come to establish themselves and don't rely on anyone, self-sustain. Okay, that's the key. You have to be able to survive on your own. That kind of was totally different, of course. But I can imagine people coming from any other culture, like from India or from some other cultures would have a different. Obviously, every culture has its origin and established way of values, of system of values. That's what I think that's what's really important to understand. But I understood eventually system of values based on the country's culture. Yeah.
You described being able to go back to Russia on occasions. Is that still possible? Do you still visit? And
No,
how is it? Not
the
recently.
last time. Okay, I visited the country after collapse of Soviet Union in the 1993, and then maybe the last time in 2004 when I work on biography of a Soviet spy that I met many years before leaving the country. But already in this 2005, I felt that I am in a totally different country. I understood the language, of course, but not the people's mind. Because between my leaving the country in 1974, 75, right? And so many years later, there were so many developments that built the psyche of people who lived in the former Soviet Union that I could not understand their psychology, what's the way of life, what is the custom, and so on. And I realized that for me, it's like almost like a foreign country. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you were a bit of a curiosity, I suppose, to them at the time you did go back, but now it's changed beyond recognition.
Oh no, that's totally changed. And frankly speaking, the moment from 2000, the year 2000, when I learned that Putin was put in charge of the country by Yeltsin, nothing else would happen. It's not, that doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. It's only natural way of a culture in which to be how to say it. I have to say that I'm not surprised. One reason is that my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, was about a Russian satirical writer of the 19th century, who Saltykov-Shchedrin. The book is called Techniques of Satire, the Case of Saltykov-Shchedrin. So when I was studying him and read him, I realized that this goes much deeper, the structure, the attitude toward the people in power and the people whom they rule than that is. For example, this satirical writer, who was, by the way, a high level of official. He was a vice president, vice governor of one of the Russian gubernia areas. And he said that the Russian people have, he called it, of course, in his book, the town of Glupov, means literally foolish. The town is called foolish. Okay, so obviously it's a satire on Russian state. And he said that actually they all suffer of начальстволюбие, means they all suffer from loving the bosses. Loving the average person loves bosses. In other words, he does not. There's not idea of like in democracy. I wanted to do something that would be for common interest. No. If this is what do you call it? From that, I remember that
they wish to be subservient to,
having a boss. This they feel normal. Then if there is no bosses, then I don't know what to do with it. Okay, there's no sense of, like in democratic country. Hey, I write in the book that my first encounter in this new book was with a kind of an immigrant fellow who was a long time in the country, and he was running for like a local government of some sort. And I asked him, why are you doing it? Because in Russia, you would run away. Soviet Union would run away from. Why we have to do running for, because it's all decided on the top. And he said, no, we want to know what we're doing. I don't want any guy coming who knows what. And so, in other words, no sense of democracy as such. Okay, there's always kind of looking up to the bosses. They're the bosses. They decide. Okay, that's about it.
Interesting. So you're a prolific writer. You've written this. You say this is your 18th book since you came to America, and you wrote before that. So do you have something in the pipeline? What can we expect next from you?
Yes, and the pipeline is a book which I call actually History of My Generation. It's called will be Chekhov in Brighton Beach, a history of one generation in stories and essays, in which I kind of follow my generation being born on the eve of World War II and going through all this process, mostly Jewish, of course, in the Soviet Union, going through the period of Stalin's anti-Semitism, and then how difficult it was on everyday level, even after he passed away, about hidden kind of grassroots anti-Semitism and so on. And then immigration coming by, why this story was called Chekhov in Brighton Beach, because Chekhov was a kind of a signature, a kind it signifies that this is Jews coming from brought on Russian culture. Chekhov is probably one of the most respected Russian writers at that time. And immigration, what all tremendous amount of issues that in part I address in this book, but in my stories, that in essays that I wrote over this period of time, I go to detail to discuss every single kind of a way of how gradually we grew into another culture, and how we eventually, one story it ends with this: we came all Soviet Jews, but we became American. In other words, what it means, one is to the left, one is to the right, one married a Mexican woman, another one married a woman from Brazil, and so on. In other words, we became Americans, multicultural kind of mix of everything. No.
Well, do let us know when it's ready. We'd love to have you back to tell us all about it. So thank you, Emil, for being with us. Sorry, we haven't managed to get through all the questions, but we've covered pretty much everything. Emil's book is a really interesting and entertaining read, and it's made all the better by his unique brand of self-deprecating humor. You can buy it on Amazon, and in the Kindle format, it's quite affordable. And as a thank you for being our guest, I'm going to send you a book of some of my photos. So that will wing its way to you. Hopefully you will enjoy that. Now, just a few words about our upcoming program before we leave you. We have a break for a few weeks now, as there's a flurry of festivals and bank holidays, but we're back on the 20th of May with Harry Brown. This talk, postponed from last year, is about his book, The 11th Plague, about Jews and pandemics. That should be fascinating. And then on June the 3rd, we have Roy Homburg speaking about fertility, feuds and flying. His talk is titled 80 Shades of Oy Vey. I can't wait for that one. We've got lots more in the pipeline. So do visit our website. You can book tickets there. And you can obviously, as I said earlier, look at recordings of past events. All online events are free, but you can make a small donation to cover the costs of putting this program on. There's a link in the chat, or you'll also find it on our website. It remains for me to thank our guest, Emil Draitser, once again. Thank you, Emil. It's been a real joy to have you back.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you all next time. Until then, stay safe. See you soon.
Thank you.